Well, I think there's sort of three pillars or three components to this. There's obviously the MSOC, the Maritime Security Operations Center, which is basically the area that collects maritime information and turns it into intelligence. The other pillar to our border integrity strategy here in O Division certainly involves our integrated border enforcement teams, our IBETs, which basically provides cooperation and coordination of operations, across the border. And case in point, I can speak of a recent human smuggling case that basically originated in Canada. Immediately, some of the American authorities were contacted. So as a result of that, we were able to, apprehend the person that was being smuggled, and as well as the boat operator. So it certainly speaks about cooperation across the border, because we're all after the same desired outcome, which is, at the end of the day, border integrity and public safety. So whether it's an American citizen or it's a Canadian citizen stepping outside his or her residence at night, they feel safe. And then the latest tool, I would say, to the latest component, maybe that I should probably call it, to our border integrity strategy is a ShipRider. ShipRider basically is an innovative program that falls under a U.S. Canadian government framework. It is actually an act of Parliament in Canada. ShipRider was first piloted back in the early 2000s in the Windsor and Cornwall area. From each pilot we learned. That also included security at previous Super Bowl, G8, G20, Olympics 2010, and so on. And today we do have a framework in place, basically under two central authorities, the U.S. Coast Guard and the RCMP. But having said that, ShipRider, as we're rolling it out into operations this spring, will evolve. And I'm very confident that other agencies are waiting on the side to see, again, the return on investment. And I'm very optimistic that whether state, provincial, or local agencies or other fellow agencies will join the program eventually. So what ShipRider does, basically, it takes away the advantage of the border from criminals, because ShipRider allows us to, on the water border, to go from one country to the other, so across to the other, by having jointly crewed vessels by U.S. and Canadian authorities. Well, I think I just spoke to our latest tool, ShipRider, where previously, in terms of enforcement, and I'll speak about enforcement, but also the domain awareness. What ShipRider is providing is we can leverage the same resources across the border. So not as much coordination needs to be involved by involving two or more agencies. I mean that. Over one target, I should say, because again, the resources are leveraged, we can go across the border. Obviously, ShipRider needs to be supported by, by the land rider, for lack of better words, or the land support, because in narrow channel areas, we have two different dynamics. We have ShipRider that's being deployed on the West Coast, and we have ShipRider, which is, on the Pacific Ocean. Where boats can go out, 25 miles out, and then work things out criminally, through illicit activities on the border. And then ShipRider can certainly watch for these people to come back in 25 miles and do the counter interdiction. Here, in the sort of Lake Huron area with Detroit River and Lake and St. Clair River, bit of a different area, so the interdiction may not always happen on the water. So therefore, that's why we'll need the support, and the support will be there both on the U.S. and Canadian side, because we've done significant outreach with our local partners. And at the end of the day, once we have, in terms of the domain awareness, whether we're tapping into MSOC or the OIC on the American side, we certainly have joint intelligence group from several agencies, providing us the intel. So it's not like we're going to be deploying on the water, trying to necessarily look at a needle in a haystack, but there will be tactical priorities, we will be intelligence led, and we'll know who we're going after. So the first three are MSOC, the Maritime Security Operations Center, the IBETS, the Integrated Border Enforcement Team. I spoke about Shiprider, and the other two are the Maritime Security Enforcement Team, which is basically a bit of a between MSET, the Maritime Security Enforcement Team, and Shiprider, we are sort of sharing some similar responsibilities, although MSET has other responsibilities such as search and rescue, coastal watch. They work very closely with Transport Canada and the U.S. Coast Guard. They are looking at obviously smuggling activities or cross-border activities, but only from the Canadian side, because these people are not designated to cross the border at will. Because first of all, they don't have the specific training associated with the Shiprider framework, and they're not cross-designated. And then the other piece to this is we do have under the border integrity strategy our MCERT. So it's basically an emergency response team on the water, so the Maritime Emergency Response Team, and we can use them in terms of shipboarding operations, tactical operations on the border. They can do different things that where they don't have to be in a boat. They can be in any area that's got water, whether they've got 3 feet of water, they're in 3 feet of water, 5 feet of water, and then based on operations, waiting for a target to show up. So they have all sorts of tactical capabilities to help support, whether again it's a cross-border investigation or a Shiprider operation, etc. So those 5 pillars I just mentioned is basically what makes up the Ontario or O Division, RCMP O Division Border Integrity strategy. But what we can't forget is, again, there's a huge domain awareness piece, a huge intelligence piece that is also supporting that. And where I'm going with this is whether it's MSOC does that for us, but there's all sorts of information we're putting into MSOC, including, for example, a dedicated Shiprider analyst that will help support operations. Well, I think it provides, first of all, I did mention that I took over Windsor Detachment back in October 2012. So obviously a lot of discussions with partners in terms of maximizing our efforts, whether it's across the border or whether it's locally with Windsor Police Service or some other smaller local forces in the Windsor area or the Ontario Provincial Police. But this brings, again, a different perspective because it's a different environment. You have several stakeholders in the room in terms of potentially what they could provide. It gives me an opportunity as well to let people know the private sector was as an officer in charge of a border detachment. This is what I'm looking at down the road. So even my own colleagues, we discussed our programs, but here provides another opportunity maybe to put a different lens on it. So you walk away from the summit, both from a technology perspective and operation perspective, with a new lens, potentially new lens on things in terms of moving forward.